Okay, class, this is going to be the last video that builds up what the final entity is you turn in for the Excel assignment. So when we last left you, we were on this part of the Excel spreadsheet. You had done this first part with the Gainesville entry-level item for someone in your career field in entry-level position, and did a budget and did the pie chart of your budget. And then you went through and thought about 3 cities you wanted to live in, and did the salary comparison using that same format, using that same website to go through. And then we did a cost of living comparison using a different website to go through, comparing what you had cost to live in Gainesville versus other cities. You picked 3 cities that were important to you, that you would be interested in starting your career in, for the factors of happiness and fulfilling work and career, and then also that money entity in that Venn diagram of happiness. We were comparing money by the salary versus cost ratio. So last part of the assignment is to do some meaningful graphs of this data and to talk about graphs and how to make them look a little more professional for comparison, and what good data analysis and pictorial analysis of data through graphs looks like. So last thing you're going to do in this assignment is use this data you've come up with, and that was very personal to you, towards that Venn diagram of happiness, and make some graphs. So I'll show you what you need to do. You need to make some graphs. So the first graph we're going to do is to look at this salary over cost ratio versus city. So this would be on the y-axis, and this is going to be on the x-axis. And to do that, we're going to make a graph. So to make a graph out of that, we're going to go to that Charts tab, and this is how you do it on the Mac. If you did the PC videos, it might be slightly different. We're going to do a column graph, and we're going to just do this clustered column, a 2D clustered column. We're not doing any fancy 3D graphics on this stuff. So 2D clustered column on this data, and the data we wanted to look at was the cities and the salary versus cost in those cities. So again, you need to select the data you're going to use for this. And for this one, we're going to select the data using a manner where you hold down either the Command key on a Mac or the Control key on a PC and select 2 different little groups of data. So in this chart data range, I'm going to pick these titles of the cities, and then I'm going to hold down my Command key on a Mac or Control key on a PC and pick these 3 salary over cost items. And I'll move this out of the way. You can see how the graph is starting. It has the cities on the x-axis on the bottom, that ratio, that number on the y-axis, which is how we want to display it. And it has the 3 cities, but we want to make sure we include a title on our graph. So for our title, we want to do that salary versus cost. So you can either type it in here in the name thing, or you can click the actual cell that has the words in it to use. So I'll show you how to click the cell. So if I click on this, I'm going to click that salary versus cost. I'm going to click back here, and that'll bring that title into there on the graph. And I'm going to say, okay, we're going to do a little more manipulation after this. But what it gives me is a graph where on this axis it has that non-dimensional term we came up with that was salary over cost compared by city. Now, one thing I want you to do on these graphs is to go through and think about what is redundant in this. So we have this little key here, this legend, that says, oh, this blue thing is salary versus cost. But we've already titled it salary over cost. This is kind of showing the same information twice. This little thing's not adding anything to the graph except taking up space. We're going to get rid of it. Oh, let me get back over there. We're going to get rid of this guy, this little legend, because it's not like we're plotting multiple items in a legend, like in the last graph on the pie chart, where we needed that color coding to tell things apart. There's only one thing on here, and it's in the title of what it is, so we don't need this legend. It's just taking up space. So I'm going to just delete that, and I want you to do the same thing. So we have salary versus cost by city. It's a very clean graph. It goes from 0 to 1, and it's broken up by 0.1 entities, and it's something that we compare city by city, and with these 0.1 increments it's broken up to, you can clearly see this is between 0.7 and 0.8, but closer to 0.8. This is just about between 0.5 and 0.6, and this is just over 0.9. So with those 0.1 entities, it's a clear way to break up the data and see where it lies. And we know what it's about from the title, and it's a nice, clean, professional looking graph. So we got rid of that legend. It was just extra stuff, not needed to tell what we're looking at. Now, that was one of the factors in that Venn diagram of happiness or money, which we're looking at salary versus cost. The other two were the work and happiness, so we're going to do other plots for those. So I'm going to zoom this out just a little bit so I can fit multiple things on here for you to see. All right, so let's do a similar graph for work now, work versus city and how you rated work. So we'll go back to that column graph, the 2D column. I'm going to select my data, and then in my data range I'm going to do a similar thing where I highlight the cities, and then I'm going to hold Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, highlight those three things in the work column that relate to those cities, and then it shows you this little preview and I can see, oh yeah, that looks about right. I need to give this a title, so we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click on the word work, and that should have, I'm going to scoot this over, appeared as the title. It looks good. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to drag this graph up here next to the other one, and we're going to talk about comparing data and what that means. Again, this word work is redundant. We don't need it here and here. It just takes up extra space. We only would need a legend if there was multiple things in the graph we were looking at. So I'm going to get rid of this thing because it's just taking up space and doesn't make my graph look any nicer. So when we have work and salary over cost, these were two of the factors we're looking in that Venn diagram of happiness. We have our three cities. But let's look at the axis here, this vertical axis, or the y-axis as it's usually called. It goes from 0 to 1.2, and this one goes from 0 to 1. When you're kind of comparing data from one graph to the other, the range of the axes really need to be, go back here, the range of the axes need to match up for it to be a legitimate comparison. Yeah, these are the same height from here to here, but the numbers they represent are something different. This one goes from 0 to 1. This goes from 0 to 1.2. It's not fair to compare data on two graphs with different ranges on the y-axis. To do a fair visual comparison of data, they need to go from the same range to the same range. So I'm going to show you how to change this, and I want you to do the same thing. So we're going to change this vertical axis. I'm going to double click on it, and we're going to change the range to what the other range was, which was 0 to 1 in 0.1 increments. So the way you want to do that is you want to go to the scale, and our minimum we're going to leave at 0. On our maximum, we're going to change this to 1 instead of 1.2. And remember, the other one's increments were 0.1, so we're going to make sure this keeps the same, the major unit of 0.1. So now I'm going to go from 0 to 1 in increments of 0.1, and I'll move this out of the way, and I'm going to click OK. And it did the same thing. So it goes from 0 to 1 in increments of 0.1. And now you can see the y-axis on both of these match, and it's more fair to visually compare data from one to data to the other because we're going to the same range. It's no longer skewing the data based on moving around that axis. Okay? So I want you to do that for work, and then do the same thing for happiness. So go over here, well, I'll do it down here for right now, but then I'll move it over. We're going to make a third graph the exact same way. We're going to do a column graph that are those clustered columns, and we're going to select our data, and we're going to get the data range of those cities, and I'm holding down Command on my Mac. Happiness numbers. Let's preview it. Looks pretty good for the numbers, but we need our title. So I'll click this on here, get my happiness as my title. Yep. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to zoom out just a little further so I can fit everything on one picture for you. Here we go. And again, this happiness is redundant. It's here and here. This adds no scientific, legitimate value to looking at the data. Going to get rid of that. And again, this axis goes from 0 to 1.2. We need all these to match the range. so that's legitimate, looking from one to the other and what the data means and if we're weighing all these factors with each other. So I'm going to change this axis to the maximum to be 1.0, and it goes to increments of 1. I say OK. So now we have 3 graphs, salary over cost, work, and happiness, where the factors going from 0 to 1. And remember, we defined 1 for work as that's the place where we'd be most engaged at our job, and happiness on 1 was the city we'd most like to live for whatever personal reasons. And salary over cost, we're saying on this comparison, a 1 was it's going to cost the same to live in as I make money. As it goes below that, it's going to cost more to live there than I make. But again, remember, the tools we're doing for search are kind of general factors of what a starting salary might be. Your offer might vary. You might be able to live there for a different amount than those websites gave you, but we got to use something for prediction of this assignment. So I want you to start with making these 3 graphs to do a comparison. And then we need to do the total factors. So remember, our Venn diagram of happiness had that money entity, and then we had the work entity and the happiness entity. We kind of want to see how they all weigh with each other. So we can look at these individually. So salary over cost was our money. From this and my analysis for the particular job field I was looking at, it looks for money, Tampa might be the winning bet for me. For work, for the most engaging job, looks like Boston might be the best bet for me. For happiness, we're back over here at Tampa being the highest rated one. So these are 3 independent entities, and then we were going to compare them all together, and we did that total of factors. So I want you to make that graph too. So the total happiness factors. So we're going to do it in a similar manner. Do a column. We're going to select our data. I'll move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So chart data range, I'm going to pick those cities, and then hold down my command key, pick that data from the total factors, and I'll move this out of the way. You can see it's making those entities together. I also want a title on here, so I'm going to do that title there, and I'm going to click OK. And we're going to look at the total of factors on here. We don't need it twice. Again, I'm going to take this legend out because we're not having 2 different things we need to use a legend to compare. So for professionalism, it's good to get that out of there. And then we have total of factors of 3 cities. So when I do the total of factors comparison, let me zoom in a little here so I can talk about it. When I look at this total of factors, I want to make it a little different from the other 3. So color is one way to do that. That's one thing to take into consideration, though, is some companies print things out in black and white. Some people are colorblind. Color's not the only way. There's different patterns you can use, and that's been shown in the lynda.com videos. But for this one, we're going to choose a different color to show that this isn't the same comparison as those other 3 graphs. So we're just going to change the color of these, and I want you to do that. So you click on these bars, and we're going to format the data series. And what we're going to do on this is go to fill. Make sure this is in here. This is the window that pops up. Fill is like a fill color, like you're pouring paint in it, so they do it as that. And instead of automatic, let's just pick a different color, and given our Gator status, the other one was blue, we'll make this one orange. So do your total of factors in orange. So it's another thing I want to make sure you know how to go in and change those entities. And then this tells us a little bit about comparison. So total of factors, we have Boston is right about a 2.5 for the total. Miami's down a little, just over 2. And Tampa's up, not quite at 2.5, but just below it. So when I look at a total of factors for this comparison, Boston and Tampa are pretty close. So that would be a good way to say, in these things that I've considered as a young professional, those 2 are close. I should really have a decent discussion with both of those companies and both of those places. And either way, I'm probably winning, because they ranked high in that overall comparison of all of them. And then also look back at the financial offers to make sure the salary might be different than what we did in this initial comparison. So you might get offers from a city that are higher than you might have done an analysis with this website for. So that's a total of factors comparison. So I want you to do that as well within here. And then go through, and I want you to do just a little bit of discussion on here. So for this, I want you to just talk a little bit about what your comparison means to you. So in order to do that, you can insert text. What I'd like you to do is do it next to these graphs. So let me make this back a little smaller. Make this back a little smaller here. And go ahead and do something to put text in there for it. One way to do it is to merge cells, and I'll show you what that looks like. So to merge cells, it's like grouping a bunch of cells together. So I'm going to group these cells. I'm going to right click on them. And where did we go here? Insert. Format cells. There we go. Hopefully that's not off the page. It's format cells is a term. I think my video is covering that. Yep, format cells. And what I want you to do from there is to merge them. So we went over from number, it started, to alignment. And I want you to merge cells and to wrap text. And what that's going to say to do is merge cells. That makes it one big cell that you can type in. And then wrap text lets the text go from line to line to line instead of just disappearing off to the right. So merge those cells and wrap the text. And then you're going to type in that block. Okay, so it made this big block here. So it looks like one big cell now. Go ahead and put an outline around that. An outside border. So we go to the borders tool, outside borders. And in here, I just want you to type up, do it about, let's say, 100 words. So type 100 words that tell your story about this analysis. Discuss the 3 graphs of salary versus cost, work, and happiness, and why the values are what they are. Discuss your total of factors graph and what that means to you. Alright, so we have text here. One thing you're going to want to do is, you see how it's shifted down in the bottom? Just shift this up to the top, and then it's up here in alignment, align text top. And I want you to type up 100 words of what your story is about this analysis. I want you to describe these 3 graphs in those 100 words. Salary versus cost is pretty easy where you got those numbers from if you followed the process. I want you to say why you gave the work the numbers you gave them for each city, and why you gave the happiness the numbers you gave them for each city. And then what this total of factors means to you. Does it mean both Boston and Tampa are equally rated? It's going to be a really hard decision. I'm going to look at offers in the future. Given everything equal, personally I might go with Tampa because I have family there, and I really don't like the snow. So these are things to say out loud, but type out loud too here, because these are important things to do an analysis on, and it shows you how to merge cells and insert text into Excel, and something for you to reference later and how to do these things. So the goal of this class is to learn how to use these software platforms, but in doing it, do this analysis on yourself. And you're going to save this. Make sure you save your file. Alright. And that's the file you're going to upload as your next assignment in the Excel assignment. So we went through a lot of things in this, and I want to talk through them one more time to make sure you include all these entities for grading it. So the important things for grading it are, you did the process we did in following the video to find your annual income in Gainesville entry level in your field using that website. You're displaying this column as dollars. You took out taxes using the formula equals 0.2 times the salary. Annual income after taxes, you also used a formula in that cell and subtracting it out. Your monthly income after taxes, you used a formula in that cell dividing it by 12. You went through your monthly expenses. You did a self-analysis of what you might spend money on. First one, you always put away savings and retirement, and that cell was a formula of 0.1 times your monthly income after taxes, and these are things that were in the other video we covered on this. And then you did categories that were meaningful to you, that were an honest analysis if you were a young professional in Gainesville, what things would cost. And if you don't know what they would cost, this is the time to learn that, to plan for making your own personal budget to live on. And you sum that up to total monthly expenses. I want you to make sure your monthly expenses are less than your monthly income, so you learn how to live on a budget. So you're going to do that formula of income minus expenses as we talked about down here. I want you to put in what your search term was that you used on that page, so we can go back and check that the salary you're putting in here was the one you based on that search term with less than a year experience in Gainesville. Then we covered how to copy data and do a paste special. So we copied and paste special over here. Then we covered about using professional titles for a graph and making those words shorter and maybe all looking the same with a capital letter at the beginning and looking nice and clean words for a graph. Then we covered how to sort data. We took all this data and we were sure to sort it by column G into decreasing money. So from the highest to lowest, we did a sort, and we did a special kind of sort on there, that it wasn't just the first choice it gave. We did a sort special and picked on this column by ascending to descending. We made sure column G was money, and then we went through and made this graph, and I'll scroll up just a little in case the video's over it. And when we did the graph, we made sure all the items were shown in here by moving this legend around and pulling the bounds of it so all the titles were shown. We double checked that this went from big to small, because it should have if we sorted this data properly, and we made sure the dollar amount showed on here. And we put the graph in a spot that it wasn't blocking the other data. You created a new sheet. Label this sheet Gainesville Entry Level. We created a new sheet to put the other data on. You need to know how to make multiple sheets in an Excel spreadsheet. We labeled this one Salary and Cost, Work, Happiness. And then we went through and did comparisons of 3 cities you might want to start your career in. And those were up to your own personal factors you're going to describe in text of what those cities were. But you went through and used the website we had used before for the starting salary analysis and did it as an entry level, that first 10% bracket of incomes as I showed you for each of those cities for your entry level position. We did a cost of living analysis based on taking that number from Gainesville as what it would cost to live in Gainesville. We'd say, let's assume your starting salary in Gainesville is what it would cost to live in Gainesville. What would it cost to live in these other cities? And we used that other website to go through and enter. I'm going to go from Gainesville making this with this much cost of living, and then enter the other city you want to go into, and it'll give you a different number for what the amount of money you would need to maintain a similar lifestyle and cost of living, and enter in what these 3 cost of living numbers were that other website returned for the comparator cities. Then we made a non-dimensional column of salary over cost. I do want you to fill these cells with light gray, this D, E, and F, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll highlight them all here. These ones, do that fill color of light gray because they're different. These are the non-dimensional numbers we're going to use for graphing. They're not the same as this data in what we're comparing. So you filled in this D column using a formula of salary divided by cost of living. We learned about dragging a formula down to make it to multiple cells instead of retyping it. We're going to go over to the work column. The work and happiness numbers are a very personal assessment of work as far as where you'd be most personally fulfilled for the jobs or the job opportunities right now if you don't know different actual offers from different cities. And the happiness factor based on more personal factors of where you might want to live or your spouse or partner might want to live. And we rank these as 1 being the peak of work happiness, work fulfillment, and 1 being the highest of happiness, and then doing some fractions down down from there, maybe ranging from 0.5 to 1, based on 1 being the most and 0.5 being of the 3 cities maybe your least favorite, or maybe they're all 3 equally high. They don't have to be different numbers. You can have some that are the same number, say 2 cities are both 0.7s on your scale. That's cool. But put honest numbers in there based about thinking about those factors for you. We did total of factors, and we used the sum formula in here and drag that formula down as well to add up these 3 entities for each city to be a total of factors. Please fill this in blue because it's going to be a different entity that we're graphing. It's not the same. We made these 3 graphs. I want you to make these 3 graphs with the titles the way we did it, making sure this vertical axis is the same way. They're all 3 comparisons, that the axes go to the same unit, the same minimum and maximum, and are broken up the same way as each other. So it's fair to visually compare across here which ones are higher and which ones are lower, and line them up with each other across here horizontally, so you can do a clean visual comparison of all 3 of them. And with their axes the same, it's really fair to then visually compare data. Get rid of that little key that was in there because this title is the same as that legend word that came up, and it's unnecessary data. It looks unprofessional to have it in 2 places. I want you to make this total of factors graph, make it a different color, make it orange, do the fill color orange so I know you know how to go in and change that fill color. And then look at this analysis and say what it says. I want you to go over here, merge a group of cells, do the outline around those cells, do this, when I click off of here, this black outline around those merged cells, and then type 100 words that tell your story about this analysis by discussing these 3 graphs, how you got to them, what they mean to you, and by how I got to them is, for work, why did you give Boston a 1? Why did you give Miami this? And then the analysis of what they mean to you. Also discuss this total of factors graph and what it might mean to you in making your first job choice decisions for a starting job. And save this Excel file, and you're going to upload this Excel file as your next assignment. Alright guys, that's it on this Excel file of what you're going to upload as part of your professional portfolio. And we went through and learned a lot of different tools in Excel in doing this. Alright, take care.